of Realcomm's favorites. He is a rock star in the world of innovation and real estate technology. He's the head of research at CBRE and created and sort of heads up the Americas Research Group. Please welcome Spencer Levy. How are you?
How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Thanks for having me up here.
My
again.
pleasure. Yes, always a great pleasure. You've been looking around. What's new? What's exciting? What's innovative?
Well, I would say that this event's really cool, right? And it's not just cool stuff, but I was just speaking with some vendors a moment ago about some of the things I used to do early on in my career. I was an attorney, and early on in my career, a lot of the document work you were doing in terms of just abstracting and getting the data out and making sure it's accurate was really a big part of my job back then. I mean, the ability to take that information, take a picture, put it in almost automatically, and it's 95% accurate, and then it machine learns. I mean, unbelievable, right? You know, it's all those types of functions. When I was an attorney, and then when I was a banker, a lot of the spreadsheets, they're just getting automated, and they're getting better. And you know, as it relates to commercial real estate, it's not just the practitioners of commercial real estate, like a lawyer or a banker, that are getting impacted, but from a building system standpoint. I mean, I was looking at all the different building systems companies here, you know, just how they are increasing the efficiency of our buildings, so that really there's almost no waste, or when we get to the point where there'll be almost no waste. So, a ton of cool stuff here.
How about you in person? I see you've got a wearable. How is wearable technology affecting you personally?
Well, I like my Apple Watch, and I said this joke on stage, but I'll say it again now. I said I bought the Apple Watch because I also have 3 kids, a dog, and a minivan.
Yeah.
And my minivan, I call that my mojo destroyer. And so my Apple Watch balances it out a bit.
It does it really?
It gives me a little bit of hip and cool to it, right?
Right.
But the reality is that I have several devices. I got the watch, I have the phone, I've got the iPad, I got the computer. And you know, I certainly want to get to the point where I'm a one-device guy. I think person.
Sure.
I think everybody does. I think we're a long way from that. But you know, I'll also say something completely opposite than that. I also want to be a guy that can put it down and like get away from it.
Right.
And so I think that the beauty of technology is that you're always available. The bane of technology is that you're always available, and it becomes not just addictive personally, but people expect that level of responsiveness out of you as a professional. And so it's something that we need to improve upon.
As a head researcher for a company that is consistently at the cutting edge,
Yes.
what are some of the trends that are not being talked about as much that you can still see out there on the horizon?
Sure. Well, I think I look at everything in like yin and yang, good and bad, techno-optimist, techno-pessimist, and this is kind of what I talked about earlier today. But one theme that I'm talking about today that I think is the single biggest economic issue in the world today, and that's a big statement given we got Brexit out there, we've got the China issue, we've got the oil issue, interest rate, we've got all these issues out there. But they all actually pale in comparison to this issue, productivity. The average productivity of the average worker, not just in America, but in the world, is slowing down and actually going negative. And it's a tremendous problem, because ultimately the only way to build wealth is for the average worker's work output per hour to get stronger. It's going down. And you would say, well, how's that possible with all this new technology? How's it possible when the average manufacturing worker is 50 times more productive than they were 100 years ago? It's a conundrum, but we need to solve it, because among the issues that we have today overall is that we have a demographics issue where people are getting older. We have a political intransigence problem. We have a wealth inequality problem. But they all come together to cast this pall over the world that we're just not getting more productive. So I would suggest that as new technologies come in, whether it be automation or otherwise, they need to think about, how is this stuff not only going to disrupt, per se, how's it going to make us not only feel better, but be better? And that's different, because you know, it used to take all day to do a load of laundry, right? Now you can do it with a push of a button.
Right.
And you're obviously better off by pushing a button and having 9 hours of leisure than 9 hours of doing laundry.
Sure.
But the missing link here is, how do we make this technology make us better overall. And not just in generalities, not just more free time and happier and easier and more convenient. Put the money on the table, make the average person more productive, because that to me is what's going to make a lot of these technological innovations embraced rather than considered a threat, because that's the issue right now, where a lot of people consider a lot of these new technology disruptors threatening. They shouldn't be. They should be pie expanders rather than cannibalizers, but they need to take these other productivity issues into consideration.
That's very interesting. Let me be a devil's advocate for a second. Horses. We've had them for, the humans have used them for thousands of years. 1 horsepower. And you can only run that horse to a certain degree. And it is no difference between now and 100 years before now, and even 1,000 years. You have to feed them, water them, and they can only output so much.
That's right.
Are you perhaps looking to push humans farther than we can go? I mean, you can only get so much work out of a human. It sounds as though you're almost demanding that the technology, other than rewiring the brain, how can you expect more?
Well, I'm mentioning this both in economic terms and in social terms.
Okay.
In economic terms, when somebody has a disruptive technology, I want it to be something to say, okay, this is not just cooler, faster, all this stuff. Is it making us more productive? What is it doing for output? How is it, now, let me say one thing about output. There's a great Russian chess player, famous guy, Garry Kasparov.
Yeah.
And Garry Kasparov said that measuring an economy by measuring its average GDP growth is like going to a hospital and measuring the health of the average patient by the average temperature, right? So not particularly accurate.
Right.
But that's how most people measure things. And so, number one, they need to make the big picture better. But second, they need to make the average person better. And that seems to be lost in a lot of the shuffle here. And we could talk about the labor force participation rate dropping. It used to be that back in 1965, about 97% of high school educated people in America worked. Today it's 83%. It's a massive drop-off of what are we doing with these folks. But it's not just a US issue, it becomes a global issue, because the way that emerging economies used to advance is that they had cheaper labor to do a lot of the tasks that the more established economies didn't want to do. But now with automation, there's more insourcing. So the example I would give you is that at our peak in the United States and Western economies, we had about 40% of our workforce in manufacturing. China peaked out at about 15%, and they're now contracting because of automation. Well, what does it say to all those other emerging economies that aren't even there yet? Are we not going to be able to use their workers because we don't need them? These are serious, not just American issues, but global issues. And the more that technology thinks about this stuff, not just in the next cool disruptive thing, but how do we make it so all better off? And how do we deal with the transition? That's the thing that's not been dealt with. It's, it may be cool at point B, but how do we deal with point A to point B?
Wow. Right? Because some of the things that we've been talking about here earlier today has been about how open sourcing software is basically giving away solutions in the hope that more people will adopt the technology and the partnerships will generate the revenue, not the actual sale of the actual solution.
Right.
So it almost seems that we may be in what we're talking about transcending typical capitalism in this. If the workforce is going to be automated, it will give people more time. If the goods that we sell are going to be shared rather than sold, it will generate even less revenue. It almost seems like we're going to have to transcend the normal widget per dollar, hour per dollar architecture and start to come out with a new solution.
Well, here's the solution, and it's already being imposed or proposed across the world. There was a famous economist, his name was Milton Friedman, and he coined the term helicopter money, which is literally giving money away to people so that they spend it. That solution is now being tried in Sweden, Switzerland, Finland.
Right, the minimum annual
wages,
right.
Because that is going to make up for some of the loss of jobs, essentially, due to automation. But to me, the long-term solution is one word, it's education. Right? How do you get people to be better skilled in a world where certain skills are no longer needed. But that's the long-term solution. But the transitional solution is things like helicopter money, but we need to come up with other solutions like that. The whole debate over free trade right now is all based upon that we haven't come up with a transitional solution.
Right.
Free trade is a great thing. It's the only answer, but transitionally it displaces a lot of people,
Sure.
and we need to figure out what to do to help them get to the next phase.
People at this trade show, on some level, are concerned with their buildings, with their maintenance. Can there be a place where we as an industry look at these larger pictures and these larger issues and try and be a part of the solution?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because the example I give to that is what's going on right now in a lot of the major economies like San Francisco. Okay, San Francisco right now has such a tremendous affordable housing shortage right now that they could literally build 500% more housing and absorb it based upon the demand, right? And right now, the industry isn't doing anything about that. And so people say, well, too bad, capitalism, right? Well, wrong. Because if we don't solve it, the state will. And so the industry needs to see actual problems and work to solve them rather than saying, oh, well, it's somebody else's problem. It'll become your problem because the state will solve it through either taxation or by limiting how you can build certain buildings. So we can never put our head in the sand about the implications about what we are doing or not doing, because ultimately the alternative solution where the state solves it for us is a lot worse.
Spencer, it's been real, right?
Mm-hmm.
If people want to, obviously you are at CB Richard Ellis, you are doing their research, you are out in front of this thought leading, but if they want to stay at this level of the conversation, what can they do to continue to engage with you?
Sure. Well, I am an active social media person. In addition to my Twitter account, I have a LinkedIn account. I post blogs every 2 weeks. I post videos whenever I have a video opportunity.
Sure.
So please reach out to me anytime. Twitter, LinkedIn, probably the two easiest things. But go to CBRE Research. We have some great stuff, as do many of our big competitors in the space as well.
Terrific. Spencer Levy, thank you so much
Thank you for
being
having
here.
me.
Amazing. You're getting it here first. Sorry about that. You're getting it here first with Spencer. We are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we've got